There's a story whispered behind the closed doors of boardrooms, investment houses, and billionaire retreats, a story most people never get to hear. It's not a fairy tale of luck or some overnight success fantasy. No. It's the silent blueprint that men like Jack Ma followed to build empires while others were still trying to figure out how to survive. And today, you're going to hear the first chapter of that blueprint. The rules you were never taught, the thinking you were never shown, the moves you were never supposed to understand. When Jack Ma began, he wasn't powerful. He wasn't connected. He wasn't rich. He wasn't even technical. He started with rejection. Harvard said no. Dozens of jobs said no. KFC said no. But what they were actually doing was forging the first rule: turn every rejection into fuel, not failure. You see, most people crumble under rejection. They internalize it. They believe it defines them. But Jack understood something different. Rejection is information. Every no is a data point. Every closed door is simply a map pointing toward the one door that will open. And so he kept walking. Kept knocking. Kept studying. Kept observing. The first strategy was born: reframe rejection as redirection. But that's not where the secret ends. Reframing is only the entry point. Once you've recalibrated your relationship with failure, you step into the second principle: compounding obsession. While others chase 10,000 ideas, millionaires like Jack Ma lock in on one problem and go deep. They become obsessed with understanding the ecosystem around that problem, the psychology of customers, the gaps in the market, the weaknesses of existing players. Jack wasn't building a business. He was building an entire ecosystem of understanding. Every waking hour, every meeting, every observation, every headline, every global trend was fuel. He wasn't thinking about just selling products. He was studying systems, logistics, supply chains, cross-border payments, small businesses struggling to scale. Alibaba wasn't simply a company. It was the result of years of intellectual compounding, layer after layer of small insights stacked until they became impossible to compete with. Here's where most people fail. They want results before mastery. They want applause before they're world-class. But wealth doesn't reward dabblers. It rewards compounded mastery. But even mastery is insufficient unless you understand the third rule: position before execution. Jack Ma didn't launch Alibaba as soon as he had the idea. He didn't rush. He waited. He observed. He positioned. Timing is everything in empire building. If you move too soon, the infrastructure may not exist. If you move too late, you're irrelevant. Timing is not luck. Timing is readiness meeting window of opportunity. He saw that China was on the brink of a digital explosion. He saw that millions of small businesses lacked access to the internet's power. He saw that government policy was slowly opening up. He saw that global investors were searching for ways into China's market. When all these pieces aligned, then he moved. And because he moved at the convergence point, his execution became a tidal wave that others couldn't stop. But how do you position yourself? You study second and third order effects. Most people analyze the next 6 months. Millionaires analyze the next 6 years. They see the dominoes long before they fall. The fourth strategy Jack Ma lived by was even more dangerous, even more counterintuitive: stay weak where others flex. You see, most founders want to prove they're experts at everything: technology, operations, finance, product development. Jack Ma knew his weakness. He wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a coder. But instead of trying to close the gap himself, he built a talent magnet. He surrounded himself with people far smarter than him in each discipline. His strength wasn't in being the smartest person in the room. It was in building a room full of smarter people who followed his vision. This is what I call ego subtraction. The weak founder needs to feel important. The powerful founder builds systems where they're replaceable, because replaceability creates scalability. Jack Ma didn't build Alibaba around his own technical brilliance. He built Alibaba around an unstoppable team who could execute on his vision with surgical precision. But talent alone isn't enough. The fifth strategy is what separates empire builders from fragile operators: create unfair endurance. Most businesses run on short fuel, initial funding, viral growth hacks, media hype. But Jack Ma knew that real empires are built on operational endurance, systems that allow you to survive the winter while others freeze. He built cash reserves. He focused on profitability when others were obsessed with valuation. He kept overhead lean. He diversified income streams. He obsessed over customer retention. Because here's the brutal truth: most businesses don't die from competition. They die because they can't survive the next crisis. Jack Ma built Alibaba to thrive in both boom and collapse. His mindset wasn't, "How big can we get this year?" It was, "How unkillable can we become over the next decade?" But even endurance isn't the endgame. The sixth rule enters once you're established: control narrative, control capital. Jack Ma mastered media. He mastered public speaking. He mastered positioning Alibaba not just as a business, but as a national asset to China's digital revolution. That narrative made regulators cautious to attack him. That narrative attracted foreign capital desperate for exposure to China's growth story. That narrative made customers proud to support a homegrown champion. And here's the part nobody teaches: narrative is more valuable than revenue. The right narrative attracts partnerships, protects against politics, and expands market dominance. Jack Ma understood that media appearances, speeches, government relationships, these weren't vanity. These were capital accelerators. And yet, beneath all of these layers lies the seventh and final rule of this first chapter: operate from mission, not transaction. The world thought Jack Ma was building Alibaba to get rich. But internally, his mission was always bigger: to empower small businesses across China. To make commerce accessible to anyone, anywhere. This mission created trust. Trust attracted top-tier employees. Trust attracted loyal customers. Trust attracted patient capital. Mission-based operators attract an ecosystem that transcends short-term profits. Mission is the only fuel that survives the brutal cycles of business. Without mission, burnout wins. With mission, momentum compounds. And so, as this first part closes, you must understand: Jack Ma didn't build Alibaba by chasing opportunity. He built Alibaba by engineering layers of positioning, psychology, endurance, talent, timing, and mission, all working in synchronized precision. The rules you were never taught are now unfolding. And we've only scratched the surface. When most people study billionaires, they study outcomes. Revenue, IPOs, valuations, headlines. But what the world fails to study is how those outcomes were orchestrated, long before anyone was watching. This is where we enter the second layer of Jack Ma's hidden strategies: engineering asymmetry, how to tip every battlefield in your favor before the fight even begins. The masses enter markets hoping for a fair shot. They dream of playing on an even playing field. But millionaires? They reject the very idea of fairness. They do not enter markets they can't tilt. They engineer leverage before exposure. Jack Ma understood this from day one. The first tool he used to engineer asymmetry was what I call regulatory intelligence. While others feared government restrictions in China, Jack studied them. He made regulators his partners, not his enemies. He framed Alibaba's mission as a national priority: supporting millions of small businesses, reducing unemployment, driving economic growth. This created what insiders call political capital insulation. He wasn't just building a company. He was building infrastructure the government would benefit from. This shifted the power dynamic. Regulators who could have shut him down instead saw Alibaba as a vital artery in China's economic future. He earned permission to scale, while competitors operated under constant threat. But politics alone isn't enough. Asymmetry requires operational mastery. Jack Ma's second tool was two-speed scaling. Most entrepreneurs scale revenue first. Jack scaled infrastructure and data ahead of revenue. He invested aggressively in payment systems, Alipay, logistics networks, Cainiao, cloud computing, Alibaba Cloud, each of these systems fed into each other. By the time competitors tried to catch up, Jack wasn't running an e-commerce site. He was running China's digital nervous system. Every small seller relied on Alibaba's payments. Every logistics partner relied on Alibaba's delivery network. Every cloud client became embedded in Alibaba's software stack. He didn't just own market share. He owned market architecture. And once you own architecture, competition becomes irrelevant. The third tool was consumer psychology manipulation. But not manipulation in the negative sense. Manipulation as understanding, guiding, directing behavior at scale. Jack knew Chinese consumers were skeptical of online payments. They feared scams. They feared fraud. So he built trust layers before anyone else. Escrow protection through Alipay. Ratings and review transparency. Aggressive anti-fraud measures. Seller accountability systems. While others focused on transaction speed, Jack focused on trust velocity. Because once trust compounds, purchase frequency follows. And when purchase frequency rises, your data dominance accelerates exponentially. Data dominance leads us to the fourth asymmetric weapon, closed-loop data ecosystems. Jack didn't allow data silos. Every buyer transaction, seller listing, delivery route, payment behavior, and customer inquiry, all of it flowed into a unified machine learning system. With every order, Alibaba got smarter. With every return, Alibaba refined logistics. With every customer support interaction, Alibaba optimized seller training. With every delivery delay, Alibaba upgraded supply chain partnerships. Over time, competitors weren't just behind, they were blind. Jack wasn't just competing on price or product variety. He was competing on omniscient, real-time market intelligence. His decisions became increasingly precise while others guessed. But information dominance requires protection. That's where his fifth layer comes in, multi-layered moats. Jack understood that single moats fail. If you protect your business with only price or only technology, you're vulnerable. So he layered. Regulatory protection, government alignment, consumer trust, infrastructure ownership, data integration, brand loyalty. These stacked moats created redundant defensibility. Even if one layer was attacked, the others held. Like a fortress with multiple walls. Now, most entrepreneurs stop here. They think defensibility is the endgame. But Jack knew real asymmetry requires psychological buy-in across all stakeholder groups. This leads to the sixth and more sophisticated strategy. Mission-driven narrative synchronization. Jack sold different versions of the same mission to each audience, to regulators. We empower Chinese small businesses. To investors. We monetize the rising Chinese middle class. To customers. We make your life easier and more affordable. To sellers. We give you national reach you could never access alone. To employees. We're building a legacy for our nation's future. By aligning every audience under customized versions of the master mission, he created voluntary defense forces across every level of his empire. Everyone felt personally invested in Alibaba's success. This is the most advanced form of leverage, distributed stakeholder dependency. The seventh tool in his asymmetric arsenal? Long-term capital starvation strategy. While competitors obsessed over quarterly numbers, Jack cultivated long-term institutional capital. Sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, state-affiliated banks. These investors were patient. They wanted Alibaba to dominate for decades, not just deliver quarterly earnings pops. This gave Jack enormous flexibility to sacrifice short-term margins for long-term market share. Outprice competitors into bankruptcy. Invest ahead of market trends without immediate ROI. And as weaker competitors chased headlines, Jack starved them of oxygen slowly, methodically, mercilessly. But the final asymmetry play is one few understand until it's too late: cultural engineering. Inside Alibaba, Jack didn't just hire employees. He indoctrinated them. He built an internal culture of ruthless customer obsession, extreme resilience to rejection, paranoid adaptability to change, public service pride tied to national purpose. Alibaba staff weren't just workers, they were missionaries. This created what every empire builder secretly wants: self-sustaining culture flywheels. When a culture polices itself, the founder's influence extends far beyond their personal presence. Execution speed accelerates. Bureaucracy shrinks. Loyalty compounds. And that, ultimately, is the power Jack Ma engineered: a living system, not a fragile company. He didn't build Alibaba to be fast. He built it to be impossible to kill. Now, as we close part 2, understand this: the key to asymmetry is not luck. It's multidimensional stacking of every advantage long before the competition even understands the game being played. The world applauded Jack Ma when Alibaba exploded beyond China's borders. But what they didn't understand was this: global scalability was never an afterthought. It was designed from the very first brick. And what you're about to hear now is the hidden engineering behind international expansion that most entrepreneurs never even dare to imagine. See, most businesses are built domestically first. Then, when success hits saturation, they begin considering foreign expansion, often clumsily. They translate the website, hire a few consultants, and hope demand carries them forward. But Jack Ma never thought like a local founder. From day one, he engineered Alibaba as a platform architecture, not a domestic product. This mindset difference is everything. The first principle Jack operated on was global problem framing. He didn't say, "We're building e-commerce for China." He said, "We're building infrastructure to allow anyone, anywhere, to sell and buy from anyone else." That small shift unlocked global optionality. Because platforms that solve human needs, not just national needs, carry exportable relevance. Commerce is universal. Trust is universal. Access is universal. Efficiency is universal. When your architecture solves cross-border frictions, your market is global. Even if your initial revenue is local. The second principle? Infrastructure modularization. Jack Ma broke Alibaba's platform into independent scalable modules: payments, Outpay, logistics, Cainiao, cloud infrastructure, Alibaba Cloud, data analytics, Data Hub, credit scoring, Sesame Credit, seller education, Taobao University. By modularizing, he could deploy or withhold certain pieces depending on regulatory climate, partnership structure, or local market maturity. This allowed Alibaba to enter new countries faster, comply with varying legal structures, partner flexibly with local champions, outpace legacy infrastructure limitations. While Western companies struggled to adapt their one-size-fits-all models abroad, Jack's modular ecosystem adapted itself dynamically. The third expansion weapon was cultural decoding strategy. Jack didn't attempt to force Chinese consumer behavior onto global users. He instead invested deeply into understanding local shopping psychology, payment trust levels, delivery expectations, regulatory fears, partner reputations. For example, in India, Alibaba backed Paytm to navigate unique digital wallet behaviors. In Southeast Asia, it acquired Lazada to leverage local e-commerce familiarity. In Africa, it studied mobile money penetration before any major Western player entered. Jack's empire wasn't Alibaba clones in every region. It was customized operating systems coded for each cultural environment. Fourth, Jack leveraged what few global entrepreneurs master: diplomatic capital alignment. Western tech giants often crash into foreign markets aggressively, assuming their capital power equals political power. Jack reversed this dynamic. He approached international expansion as economic diplomacy, framing Alibaba's growth as a benefit to local small businesses. National employment growth, tax revenue creation, digital literacy acceleration. Instead of fighting regulators, he recruited them into his growth story. This softened resistance long before political attacks could mobilize. Fifth, Jack engineered currency hedge resilience. Global expansion often exposes companies to destructive currency fluctuations. Jack Ma quietly diversified treasury holdings, hedged cross-border currency exposure, developed multi-currency payment infrastructure inside Alipay, structured international deals and blended currency baskets. This meant that while rivals bled cash during currency swings, Alibaba's balance sheet absorbed shocks like an economic tank. Sixth, and perhaps most dangerously brilliant, was his soft power brand positioning. Jack Ma himself became Alibaba's global ambassador. He was the Chinese billionaire who spoke fluent Western entrepreneurial language, the tech founder who charmed global investors while remaining culturally grounded in China, the rare public CEO who merged humility with massive geopolitical influence. Jack wasn't just building Alibaba's reputation. He was building trust bridges between global capital markets and China's emerging tech dominance. While Western politicians feared Chinese companies as state extensions, Jack positioned Alibaba as a global entrepreneur's mission. That perception difference allowed Alibaba to list in New York, raise billions in Western capital, and maintain investor confidence while expanding globally. Seventh, platform defense through network entrenchment. As Alibaba expanded internationally, it didn't simply acquire companies. It entrenched itself by integrating local banking systems, government digital initiatives, national logistics providers, SME training programs, public-private partnerships. This created multi-stakeholder dependency. If any government considered regulating Alibaba aggressively, they risked damaging local merchants reliant on Alibaba's platform. Tax revenue pipelines, infrastructure jobs tied to Alibaba's logistics. This is political immunity through economic entanglement. Jack turned his international footprint into an unavoidable economic pillar for multiple governments. Eighth, and perhaps the most advanced layer, time horizon domination. While most global companies set 5-year international goals, Jack was thinking on 25-year cycle. He knew digital adoption curves would favor late developing markets. Mobile-first economies would leapfrog traditional infrastructure. Global middle-class expansion would reshape consumption power centers. He positioned Alibaba to patiently plant seeds where growth was predictable but slow to start. By the time competitors woke up, Alibaba was embedded at the infrastructure layer, not just the retail layer. This is why Jack Ma's global strategy isn't taught in business schools. Because most MBA programs teach how to win markets. Jack Ma engineered how to own ecosystems. He didn't fight for market share. He architected market structure. Now, as we close part 3, understand this critical principle. The real empire isn't built on selling. The real empire is built on shaping how markets function. And Jack Ma rewrote that rulebook. While most people saw Jack Ma building e-commerce, what they missed was the far more dangerous battlefield he was actually dominating. The battlefield of psychological warfare. Because before you ever outmaneuver your competition in pricing, product, or market share, you must first conquer the game of perception, and Jack was a master of invisible psychological control. Every competitor Jack faced underestimated him not because they lacked intelligence, but because they misunderstood his presentation strategy. Jack deliberately positioned himself as the friendly school teacher, the humble English teacher, the non-technical, non-threatening founder, the smiling Chinese entrepreneur who wasn't Silicon Valley aggressive, the soft-spoken man who gave speeches filled with parables instead of charts. And yet behind that approachable exterior was one of the most ruthless strategic minds operating at global scale. First, psychological strategy, the illusion of softness. While American founders often projected aggressive confidence, Jack built his personal image as harmless. No Wall Street arrogance. No Silicon Valley bravado. No hyper-competitive language. This was calculated. Because aggression attracts enemies. Softness disarms them. By appearing small, Jack lowered the defensive posture of regulators, investors, and competitors. He wasn't playing chess publicly. He was playing disarming diplomacy privately. Second, psychological strategy. Asymmetric narrative anchoring. Jack didn't allow his competitors to define the conversation. He framed Alibaba as a champion of small business, a servant of the Chinese economy, a tool for national prosperity, a friend of government stability. By controlling the dominant narrative, Jack made any attack on Alibaba appear as an attack on job creation, poverty alleviation, economic modernization. His opponents had to battle not just Alibaba, but the social story Alibaba represented. Third, psychological strategy. Strategic transparency. Timing. Jack made certain things public to create confidence. Seller growth numbers, export partnerships, logistics expansion, small business success stories. But he kept far more critical data opaque: internal profitability details, full data ownership models, AI surveillance capabilities, back-end partnership agreements. He gave enough transparency to earn trust, but not enough to expose his most powerful leverage points. This created an informational imbalance where outsiders felt informed while remaining structurally blind. Fourth, psychological strategy. Manufactured underdog mythology. Even as Alibaba grew into a trillion-dollar empire, Jack kept selling the narrative of, "We're just helping small businesses. We still have so much to learn. We are nothing compared to global giants." This perpetual underdog framing attracted public sympathy, disarmed government aggression, reduced competitive targeting, attracted young idealistic talent. By always appearing humble, Jack lowered his perceived threat level while consolidating dangerous levels of power. Fifth, psychological strategy. Predictive competitor framing. Jack publicly praised competitors he was already positioned to defeat. When questioned about Amazon or eBay, Jack would smile and say, "They are great companies. We have much to learn. China is different. We all can coexist." Behind the scenes, Alibaba was outpricing their logistics, buying up their distribution partners, capturing their sellers, building irreversible data advantages. By verbally respecting his competitors, Jack delayed their response time, allowing Alibaba to scale before true competition activated. Sixth, psychological strategy. Controlled investor seduction. Jack understood investor psychology better than many Western CEOs. He knew investors crave vision they can't easily model. Investors respect simplicity. Investors follow founders who project mission over greed. In every IPO roadshow, Jack emphasized the size of China's rising middle class, the long-term digital transformation story, the empowerment of millions of SMEs, the low consumer debt ratio compared to Western economies. This generated institutional FOMO, fear of missing out, allowing Alibaba to secure capital on more favorable terms than many Western peers. Seventh, psychological strategy. Internal cultural brainwashing. Jack didn't just run operations. He ran internal identity engineering inside Alibaba. New hires were not employees. They were indoctrinated missionaries. They were trained to believe in Alibaba's national mission, accept sacrifice as part of the journey, self-police internal cultural violations, frame their careers as a patriotic duty. This created an execution army that didn't merely work for salaries. They worked for narrative purpose. Highly disciplined, self-correcting internal culture is the most effective HR weapon any founder can build. Eighth, psychological strategy. Future positioning. Through humility. As Alibaba's power grew, so did potential political backlash. Jack publicly began stepping down. He announced leadership transitions early. He appeared to retire, while still quietly controlling influence networks behind the scenes. This self-imposed decentralization reduced personal political risk, protected Alibaba's structure from personal attacks, allowed younger, more politically acceptable faces to lead. True power often hides behind new faces while controlling from the shadows. This allowed Alibaba to remain dominant even while Jack lowered his personal visibility. The lesson? The most dangerous leaders are the ones who engineer perception before they engineer product. Jack Ma built a psychological fortress so strong that by the time rivals realized what was happening, they were trapped in a game where Jack already controlled the rules, the referees, and the scoreboards. In Part 5, we'll dive into what most people never see. Backhand index pointing right, how Jack Ma engineered internal decision-making systems that allowed Alibaba to scale operations at superhuman speed while avoiding founder burnout. Most people believe business is about money, products, and strategy. But Jack Ma understood something far deeper, something very few even dare to speak about openly. Business, at its core, is psychological warfare. A battlefield of perception, emotion, and narrative, where those who control belief control behavior. You see, when Alibaba entered competitive wars, Jack Ma was rarely fighting product versus product. He was fighting mind versus mind. Not just his competitors, but his employees, his investors, his regulators, and even his customers' minds. And this psychological war was not chaotic. It was engineered. Let's start with the first weapon, the perception gap manipulation. While his competitors tried to appear dominant, powerful, and technically superior, Jack Ma mastered humble power projection. In early interviews, Jack would openly say, "I am not technical. We're just a small business helping other small businesses. We're not here to beat anyone, we want to serve." To the untrained ear, this sounded like modesty. To his competitors, it seemed harmless. But beneath that narrative, Jack was quietly building an empire at speed, while his enemies lowered their defenses thinking they had time. He weaponized low expectations. While competitors obsessed over Alibaba's perceived weakness, Jack accelerated through their blind spots. The second tool was internal identity engineering. Most founders try to build company culture. Jack built company religion. Alibaba employees didn't see themselves as workers. They saw themselves as soldiers in a movement. Jack installed ritualistic team meetings, public chants of mission statements, emotional bonding exercises, sacrifice narratives about serving small business owners. He created shared suffering mythology, where every employee felt they were fighting for something larger than themselves. This identity meant higher loyalty, lower turnover, faster execution speed, near fanatical mission alignment. When employees see themselves as part of a grand mission, their resilience becomes unshakable, even when competition, regulation, or market pressures rise. The third weapon, competitor signal flooding. Jack Ma deliberately overloaded the information environment. He constantly released public speeches, government partnership announcements, new product launches, international initiatives, media interviews loaded with vision statements. Competitors were constantly reacting to his noise. Was he serious about global expansion? Was he partnering with the government more than others? Was Alipay going independent? Was Alibaba investing in cloud to crush everyone? The volume of public signals paralyzed many rival CEOs. While they burned time and capital trying to decipher Alibaba's next move, Jack focused on his actual priorities, often invisible until too late. In chess, this is called tempo control. Jack controlled market tempo through narrative aggression, forcing rivals into reactive cycles while he remained proactive. The fourth psychological lever, stakeholder dependency weaving. Jack Ma wasn't simply managing customer satisfaction. He was engineering emotional and financial dependence across multiple layers. Small businesses who felt Alibaba was their survival partner. Government officials who saw Alibaba as an economic growth engine. Investors who saw Jack as the only bridge to China's digital future. Employees who viewed Alibaba as their personal mission field. He deliberately created conditions where each stakeholder group believed, if Alibaba wins, we all win. Once dependency is emotionalized, stakeholders defend you even when you stumble. This is the deepest form of psychological moat. The fifth layer, competitor fatigue induction. Many of Jack's aggressive expansion moves weren't just about market share, they were psychological endurance tests for his competitors. Pricing wars that drained rival cash reserves. Rapid multi-sector expansion forcing competitors to stretch thin. Simultaneous international moves requiring complex legal adaptation. Public partnerships designed to make rivals feel perpetually behind. This created long-term leadership exhaustion within competing executive teams. As Jack's rivals faced internal board conflicts, founder burnout, investor pressure, and multiple simultaneous fires, Alibaba's machine kept accelerating. Psychologically exhausted leadership collapses long before financial bankruptcy. Jack engineered this collapse repeatedly across his competitive landscape. The sixth tool: long-term scarcity narrative. While raising billions, Jack repeatedly told investors, "We are patient. We are building for 100 years. We care more about value than short-term stock price." This narrative calmed Western investors. They stopped demanding quarterly growth spikes. They bought into Alibaba as a long-horizon, compounding vehicle. This allowed Jack to make painful short-term moves, sacrifice profit for infrastructure growth, outlast impatient competitors who were pressured by quarterly markets. Patience, framed as virtue, became a psychological shield protecting Alibaba's long-term operational focus. The seventh psychological masterstroke: founder mythology construction. Jack Ma actively crafted his personal brand into a fusion of underdog rejection story, teacher-like humility, global visionary status, Eastern spiritual thinker. This mythology served multiple psychological functions. It humanized him to foreign markets. It softened regulator fears domestically. It attracted talent who admired not just his wealth, but his philosophy. It made global media fascinated, giving him disproportionate narrative oxygen. Jack Ma wasn't just a founder. He became a symbol. Symbols create movements. Movements attract global talent, capital, and partnerships. The final psychological weapon Jack deployed was what I call perceived inevitable destiny framing. He repeatedly told audiences, "The internet is China's future. Small businesses are China's future. Global trade belongs to the people, not governments." He wrapped Alibaba's expansion into unstoppable, historical inevitability. This narrative installed subconscious compliance in regulators. "We can't stop history." Investors, "We must ride this wave." Employees, "We're on a once-in-a-generation mission." Competitors, "We're simply too far behind." Destiny, once installed, removes resistance. As we close Part 4, understand, Jack Ma didn't simply play the business game. He rewired the psychology of every battlefield before the first move was made. This is why Alibaba's dominance was rarely challenged directly. His real war was won inside the minds of everyone watching. In Part 5, we'll go even deeper. Backhand index pointing right, the secret frameworks Jack used to sustain massive execution speed without founder burnout. Most people think scaling is about working harder, about endless hours, about sacrificing personal life for business life. They think that to build something the size of Alibaba, you must surrender your soul to the machine. Jack Ma rejected that lie entirely. You see, Jack wasn't just scaling operations. He was scaling his ability to execute consistently, without burning out, without breaking, without sacrificing clarity. Because here's the truth that very few entrepreneurs ever understand: you don't scale by pushing harder. You scale by building execution frameworks that protect your mind, your energy, and your decision-making capacity. Let's dissect exactly how Jack Ma engineered this personal operating system while scaling one of the most complex business empires in history. The first foundation: energy guardrails. Jack knew that energy, not time, is the true limiting resource for elite decision makers. He designed his days around protecting peak cognitive energy for vision-setting, high-stakes negotiation, talent calibration, strategic pattern recognition. Low-impact tasks were aggressively delegated. Minor decisions were systematized. Daily schedules were built around periods of maximum focus. Jack didn't waste morning hours on emails or meetings. He protected them for vision work. Because vision clarity compounds more than task execution. The second layer: radical input curation. While most founders drown in noise, news cycles, investor demands, employee drama, Jack controlled his input streams with surgical precision. He filtered only top-tier operational dashboards, only critical investor briefs, only curated geopolitical signals, only distilled competitor intelligence. He didn't allow emotional panic signals to enter his cognitive space. By restricting low-quality inputs, Jack preserved signal-to-noise clarity, which allowed for consistently higher quality decisions over long horizons. The third framework, Identity Separation Protocol. Most founders collapse mentally because they fuse their personal identity to every micro-win or loss in the business. Jack engineered separation. Business wins were system wins, not personal validation. Business losses were market feedback, not personal attacks. Public praise was narrative fuel, not ego fuel. This detachment allowed him to pivot without emotional paralysis, take criticism without ego defense, maintain long-term focus when short-term storms hit. Emotional neutrality became Jack's superpower. The fourth system, founder redundancy architecture. Jack Ma scaled himself not by becoming indispensable, but by designing systems where his absence wouldn't collapse operations. He engineered layered leadership teams, cross-functional decision-making councils, autonomous regional executives, institutional knowledge repositories, SOP libraries for every major operational function. This allowed Jack to protect mental bandwidth for strategic thinking, avoid drowning in daily fires, sustain creative freshness while the machine executed. Founder redundancy is how you avoid becoming your company's biggest bottleneck. The fifth protocol, rhythm locking. Jack designed daily, weekly, and quarterly rhythms that stabilized execution speed while protecting mental clarity. Daily, high-energy thinking sprints in the morning, relationship building later in the day. Weekly, leadership council check-ins focused on signal extraction. Quarterly, deep dive strategic recalibration sessions. Rhythm created momentum. Momentum eliminated overwhelm. Overwhelm is what burns out most founders. The sixth framework, decision stack compression. Jack didn't treat every decision equally. He categorized decisions into Type A, non-reversible, high impact, founder involved directly. Type B, reversible, moderate impact, leadership team empowered. Type C, low impact, repeatable, fully delegated to automated systems or middle management. This framework drastically reduced decision fatigue, which is the silent killer of founder endurance. Jack reserved his brainpower for asymmetric impact decisions only. The seventh discipline, mental rehearsal drills. Jack prepared mentally for worst-case scenarios constantly. Global recession simulations, regulatory attack models, competitor sabotage drills, platform collapse protocols. By pre-rehearsing failure states, Jack reduced real-time anxiety during actual crises. He wasn't hoping things wouldn't break, he was always pre-solving how they would break. This created calm dominance under pressure. The eighth protocol. Paradoxical recovery aggression. Most founders crash because they treat recovery as optional. Jack Ma treated recovery as a weapon. Meditation windows, solitude blocks, family immersion rituals, limited global travel windows with full mental disengagement. Jack understood that sustained mental edge requires periodic deep recharge. This is why he could sustain decades of hypergrowth while most entrepreneurs burn out in a few years. The ninth principle. Leadership reputation flywheel. By mastering all these personal execution frameworks, Jack created a reputation inside Alibaba of unflappable calm, predictable clarity. Non-reactive leadership, patient aggression. This reputation created internal stability, higher talent retention, stronger investor confidence, faster operational execution across departments because teams perform better when the leader exudes calm authority rather than emotional volatility. The final execution weapon Jack installed, infinite learning compression. While most founders stop learning after early success, Jack installed an information system that allowed him to stay ahead of global technological shifts, preempt cultural and consumer behavior changes, adapt geopolitical positioning long before crises emerged, refresh mental models continuously. He studied global philosophy, history, cycles, military doctrine, Eastern and Western thought, psychological game theory, cross-industry business models. Learning wasn't random consumption. It was deliberate architecture. And that's the core truth you must absorb here. Jack Ma scaled not by working harder, but by building personal execution systems that made burnout mathematically impossible. This is why he could sustain growth while preserving mental agility at levels most founders simply cannot replicate. In Part 6, we'll now shift to an even more dangerous domain, backhand index pointing, right? How Jack Ma built untouchable negotiation power and controlled deals that made him unbeatable at every table. Every great founder eventually faces the same battlefield: the negotiating table. But most founders enter that room as equals, or worse, as beggars. Jack Ma refused to ever be either. He engineered his deals with precision long before sitting down. Because in Jack Ma's world, negotiation power isn't something you bring into the room. It's something you engineer long before you enter it. This is the art of pre-negotiation power stacking, and it's how Jack Ma made deals others couldn't even imagine. The first principle Jack used was asset position framing. Jack never entered a negotiation asking for capital. He positioned Alibaba as the opportunity, not the risk. When raising capital, Jack flipped the frame. He wasn't asking for money to survive. He was offering investors access to China's inevitable digital expansion. He sold access, not need. Investors weren't evaluating Jack's worthiness. They were fighting for permission to participate in Alibaba's destiny. Once you control the frame, you control the concessions. The second layer of power, strategic scarcity engineering. Jack never chased a single investor. He always stacked multiple competing parties: Western venture capital firms, state-affiliated funds, sovereign wealth funds, strategic tech partners, domestic private equity firms. Every funding round was engineered as a scarcity game. We have limited allocation available. We are oversubscribed. You're not evaluating us. We're choosing strategic partners. This forced investors to offer better terms, faster decisions, and longer-term patience. The third tool, asymmetric value stacking. Jack always entered negotiations offering partners more than capital, access to Alibaba's infrastructure for their other portfolio companies, early exposure to emerging Chinese consumer behavior data, political soft power alliances through Alibaba's government relationships. First look deals on Alibaba's next wave of platform expansions. He created multidimensional upside for his investors. Investors weren't just buying Alibaba equity. They were buying privileged network proximity to China's future commerce ecosystem. This moved negotiations from pure valuation debates into strategic partnership discussions, where Jack controlled more variables. The fourth weapon, pre-installed execution proof. When Jack entered a negotiation, he didn't sell promises. He sold operational inevitability. By the time major funding rounds opened, seller onboarding velocity was proven. Consumer adoption metrics were exponential. Logistics partnerships were established. Payment trust infrastructure was live. Government regulatory alignment was secured. His pitch wasn't, "Imagine what we could do if funded." His pitch was, "Look at what we've already built. Capital now simply accelerates what's inevitable." This crushed investor objections. They weren't betting on potential. They were joining an unstoppable train already in motion. The fifth leverage point, political immunity signaling. Foreign investors feared Chinese government intervention. Jack neutralized this fear masterfully. He showcased active government collaboration, public endorsements of Alibaba's mission, alignment with China's employment, SME support, and national pride narratives. He engineered investor belief that investing in Alibaba is not only profitable, it's politically protected. This psychological protection reduced investor perceived risk, forcing them to offer better terms just to access that safety. The sixth lever, parallel dependency engineering. Jack built negotiations where partners became increasingly dependent on Alibaba across multiple domains: financial exposure, brand association, shared supply chain networks, data integration systems. This made renegotiation leverage heavily favor Alibaba. Even if partners wanted to push harder later, they couldn't afford to fracture the relationship. Alibaba's growth had become their growth. Negotiation power rises exponentially once partners realize they need you more than you need them. The seventh layer, controlled transparency windows. Jack mastered exactly how much transparency to give at each negotiation stage. Early stage, vision, mission, leadership quality. Mid stage, customer traction, ecosystem expansion. Late stage, financial projections, market dominance indicators. He never gave full internal operational transparency prematurely. Controlled disclosures allowed him to maintain narrative control, prevent overexposure of weaknesses, time disclosures around peak competitive positioning. Transparency, when managed skillfully, becomes a negotiation accelerator, not a vulnerability. The eighth weapon, reverse threat vectors. In high-stakes negotiations, competitors often try to weaponize fear: regulatory fears, market saturation fears, political headline fears. Jack flipped these into defensive shields. Yes, regulations are evolving, and that's exactly why you need an insider partner like Alibaba. Yes, competition is rising, which is why our infrastructure moat matters more than ever. He turned threats into validations of Alibaba's unique positioning. Fear-based attacks only strengthened his negotiation arguments. The ninth principle, exit optionality retention. Even while raising billions, Jack always preserved founder control via dual-class shares. Board voting balance tilted toward founder vision. M&A veto power. IPO timing discretion. Investors never fully owned the steering wheel. Jack protected strategic optionality to maintain ultimate empire control. And the final masterstroke, meta-narrative engineering. Every negotiation was framed within Jack's larger story arc. This isn't about Alibaba alone. This is about China's middle-class awakening. This is about millions of small businesses thriving. This is about the modernization of China's global commerce leadership. He made every deal feel morally significant, not just financially attractive. When partners believe they're participating in history, they concede terms they wouldn't otherwise offer. And that's the real truth of Jack Ma's negotiation genius. He never negotiated for price. He negotiated for destiny alignment. That's why his deals often felt inevitable. Because every variable, political, cultural, financial, psychological, was engineered before the first handshake. In Part 7, we now unlock the next layer. Backhand index pointing right: how Jack Ma engineered long-term market dominance through AI, data, and machine learning before most people even knew those tools existed. Jack Ma saw what few saw early enough: markets don't belong to those who sell. Markets belong to those who know. And in the next evolution of his empire, he didn't just build businesses. He built something far more dangerous: data dominance. While competitors obsessed over products, pricing, and market share, Jack Ma focused on building an invisible weaponized feedback loop, one that would give Alibaba predictive power so sharp it could practically script customer behavior. This wasn't luck. It was engineered. The first principle behind Jack's data dominance was full-spectrum data capture. Jack didn't allow fragmented data to exist across Alibaba's platforms. Every vertical was designed to capture buyer behavior, search intent, payment reliability, return habits, delivery expectations, seasonal trends, product reviews, customer disputes, seller responsiveness, fulfillment timelines, advertising click streams. Every single digital fingerprint became a data point. Unlike Western marketplaces that outsource logistics, payments, or add networks to partners, Jack vertically integrated these domains to ensure end-to-end data capture. The result? Every node of Alibaba's commerce engine fed back into a unified intelligence core. The second system, machine learning reinforcement loops. Most companies collect data passively. Jack weaponized it actively. Every transaction updated algorithms that immediately adjusted pricing recommendations, product placement rankings, dynamic shipping options, personalized search results, predictive inventory signals for sellers, credit scoring for buyers and merchants. Alibaba's platform became smarter with every user interaction. Every sale improved the system. Every return refined risk models. Every click trained conversion optimizers. The more the platform was used, the harder it became for competitors to catch up. The third layer, AI-powered trust acceleration. Trust is the oxygen of e-commerce. Jack Ma knew Chinese consumers feared fraud. So Alibaba's machine learning systems analyzed seller behavioral anomalies, price manipulations, review authenticity signals, dispute frequency patterns. High-risk sellers were flagged or suspended in near real time, increasing consumer confidence at scale. As trust accelerated, purchase frequency compounded. Jack didn't just build a marketplace, he built an automated self-policing trust ecosystem. The fourth system, predictive demand modeling. Alibaba didn't wait for consumers to ask for products. It predicted what entire regions would want, before they knew it themselves. By analyzing regional search trends, social media sentiment, supply chain bottlenecks, macroeconomic indicators, seasonal purchasing cycles, Alibaba pre-positioned inventory across its logistics networks, reducing delivery times and maximizing conversion rates. Jack understood, speed is not just about logistics. Speed is about predictive positioning. The fifth weapon, seller behavior optimization AI. Alibaba didn't treat sellers like independent merchants. It treated them like nodes in a machine learning network. Jack deployed AI tools that scored seller page layouts for conversion optimization, advised on ideal pricing bands, suggested cross-sell bundles based on cohort behavior, forecasted inventory risks, trained sellers on customer service best practices using dispute data. This created an army of increasingly optimized sellers, all improving platform performance without Alibaba micromanaging directly. Jack wasn't scaling management. He was scaling adaptive merchant self-correction. The sixth architecture, Alipay behavioral data loop. Because Jack controlled payments through Alipay, Alibaba captured user financial health signals, purchase pattern shifts, creditworthiness data, loan repayment behavior. This powered dynamic lending offers, personalized credit lines for sellers, fraud detection for high-risk transactions, precise underwriting for financial partners. Alibaba became not just a commerce platform, but China's most comprehensive behavioral credit bureau. The seventh system, logistics intelligence synchronization. Alibaba's logistics arm, Cainiao, was fully integrated into the data loop. AI monitored real-time delivery routes, weather disruption forecasts, regional warehouse demand curves, third-party courier performance metrics. This allowed predictive rerouting before delays occurred, inventory prepositioning ahead of spikes, dynamic shipping cost optimization. Logistics wasn't a cost center. It became a real-time operational advantage. The eighth frontier, natural language AI training. Alibaba trained proprietary natural language AI to analyze customer service chats for satisfaction signals, monitor social media for product feedback trends, auto-generate product description optimizations, filter scam listings before humans reported them. Language models allowed Alibaba to preempt both customer dissatisfaction and fraudulent activity faster than competitors. Jack wasn't just automating support. He was building early warning AI sensory organs. The ninth power center, global data scaling. As Alibaba expanded globally, it cross-referenced multi-regional purchasing patterns, detected cross-border arbitrage opportunities, adapted AI product recommendation models for regional nuances. offered predictive seller onboarding assistance based on cultural buying habits. Alibaba's data supremacy scaled exponentially as new international nodes fed unique datasets into its global AI core. The more regions joined Alibaba's network, the stronger its predictive edge became. And the 10th, most terrifying, principle Jack engineered, data-driven asymmetry creation. Jack understood that once you collect enough high-fidelity data across commerce, finance, logistics, credit, and behavior, you control who gets funded, who scales fastest, which sellers dominate search rankings, which products win pricing wars, which regions receive logistical priority, which consumers get upsold first. Data wasn't just information. It became market manipulation power. Alibaba wasn't just competing anymore. It was orchestrating the very evolution of the market it operated in. This is why Alibaba's dominance wasn't copyable. Jack wasn't simply building bigger infrastructure. He was building smarter self-learning infrastructure. Every competitor who tried to follow was already running uphill, against a system that became exponentially more intelligent every second. As we close Part 7, understand, the final empire doesn't belong to the best seller. It belongs to the best predictor. And Jack Ma engineered predictive market mastery before most people understood the game existed. In Part 8, we will now reveal the truly forbidden layer, backhand index pointing right how Jack Ma constructed geopolitical insulation, making himself nearly untouchable by both the East and West. At the highest levels of power, business is no longer just business. When your company moves billions, employs millions, and shifts entire economies, you stop playing inside one arena. You enter the most dangerous boardroom on earth, geopolitics. Jack Ma understood this long before most of Silicon Valley or Wall Street did. He wasn't just building a company. He was building a sovereign-scale power node. And with that scale comes enemies you don't see, regulators, foreign governments, central banks, political factions, media attack machines. But unlike so many global CEOs who get crushed between nations, Jack Ma engineered something far more dangerous. Geopolitical insulation. A layered, highly adaptive system designed to protect Alibaba from both domestic political threats inside China and international tensions outside of it. The first pillar of Jack's geopolitical shield was patriotic alignment architecture. From day one, Jack Ma wove Alibaba's mission directly into the CCP's core national narratives: empower small businesses aligns with employment stability, modernize logistics aligns with infrastructure advancement, expand exports for SMEs aligns with China's global trade ambitions, build financial inclusion aligns with internal poverty alleviation. Every major Alibaba initiative could be framed as an extension of the government's domestic agenda. This wasn't simple compliance. It was value fusion. If Alibaba succeeds, China succeeds. This reduced the political appetite for regulatory attacks. Alibaba wasn't framed as a foreign capitalized threat. It was portrayed as a domestic innovation partner. The second defense, controlled visibility diplomacy. Jack Ma maintained extremely careful visibility internationally. He made himself approachable to Western capital, familiar to Western regulators, respectful, but never openly defiant of CCP orthodoxy. Unlike other Chinese billionaires who flaunted personal wealth or criticized policy, Jack walked the narrow line between global accessibility. Domestic loyalty on either side fully trusted him. But both sides needed him. And that's where true geopolitical leverage begins. The third layer, soft power personal branding. Jack Ma positioned himself as a former school teacher, a cultural bridge builder, a student of both Eastern and Western philosophies, a tech optimist rather than a political figure. This disarmed international fears. He wasn't China Incorporated. He was Jack Ma, the charismatic entrepreneur. This personal narrative created unique Western media fascination, allowing Alibaba to attract billions in foreign investment, despite geopolitical tension. Jack Ma became China's safe ambassador to global capitalism. The fourth mechanism, investor ecosystem diversification. Jack structured Alibaba's capital stack with U.S. venture funds, global private equity, sovereign wealth funds, strategic Western corporate partnerships. This created financial interdependency across multiple nations. If any government wanted to attack Alibaba, they'd be hurting major funds tied to their own pension systems and capital markets. Capital entanglement became geopolitical insulation. Alibaba wasn't just Chinese. It was globally financially embedded. The fifth layer, selective platform nationalism. Internally, Alibaba promoted nationalist pride, supporting Chinese sellers first. Showcasing job creation for Chinese youth. Framing global expansion as proof of China's rise. Externally, Alibaba positioned itself as a champion for small business globalization, a neutral commerce facilitator for emerging markets. This dual branding allowed Alibaba to satisfy Chinese national pride, disarm Western protectionist narratives. Alibaba was never invading foreign markets. It was helping emerging entrepreneurs globally. The sixth insulation layer. Intelligence sharing compliance. Unlike Western tech giants that often battled regulators over data privacy, Jack quietly ensured full regulatory visibility for key state entities. Cooperative data transparency for internal national security interests. Fearing this level of controlled access, Alibaba reduced political paranoia while securing operational autonomy elsewhere. It was a trade. We don't hide from you, but you don't need to control our operations daily. This kept Alibaba on the safe side of state scrutiny while rivals faced constant audits. The seventh mechanism, international phase strategy. When geopolitical tensions rose between the US and China, Jack Ma personally attended US summits, held peace-building meetings with global tech leaders, spoke about shared prosperity and global trade. He became a symbolic peacemaker, rather than a nationalist antagonist. This posture preserved Alibaba's New York Stock Exchange listing far longer than many predicted. While other Chinese firms were delisted, Alibaba's geopolitical dance bought it time. The eighth layer, sovereign resource partnerships. Jack proactively partnered Alibaba's infrastructure with Middle Eastern sovereign funds, African development banks, Southeast Asian governments. These partners provided alternative capital channels outside Western dependence, diplomatic buffers against any single superpower's pressure. Alibaba's future wasn't tied to any single nation's success. It built multipolar diplomatic depth. This diversified Alibaba's geopolitical risk profile dramatically. The ninth shield, platform criticality engineering. Jack designed Alibaba's platform to be too integral to attack casually. Millions of SMEs depended on Alibaba for survival. Provincial tax revenues were tied to Alibaba sellers. State pension funds were invested in Alibaba equity. Logistics infrastructure was nationally integrated. Rural e-commerce initiatives supported poverty alleviation goals. Every node of Alibaba's success touched critical national interest zones. Attacking Alibaba would be attacking state priorities themselves. The final, and most dangerous, insulation Jack engineered, replaceability reduction protocol. At its peak, Alibaba wasn't just an e-commerce site. It was China's economic nervous system. Its AI systems forecasted macroeconomic trends. Its credit data fed state financial stability metrics. Its logistics platforms supported pandemic supply chains. Its payment rails underpinned consumer liquidity. Alibaba became, effectively, a quasi-sovereign utility layer. You don't casually replace your country's nervous system. This level of integration creates de facto immunity in authoritarian systems where economic stability is paramount. And that's the terrifying elegance of Jack Ma's geopolitical game. He didn't just build defenses. He built conditions where both superpowers needed Alibaba alive. This is why Jack Ma wasn't simply a tech founder. He became an unspoken node in the global power matrix. In Part 9, we now open the final window. Backhand index pointing right how Jack Ma ultimately paid the price for power, and how every empire builder faces their reckoning. No empire rises forever untouched. And no man, no matter how brilliant his architecture, escapes the silent consequence of power, the reckoning. Jack Ma built one of the most defensible empires of the 21st century. He mastered psychology, data, culture, regulation, diplomacy, and global finance. But in the shadows of such dominance, the invisible ceiling of state control lowered. Slowly at first, then suddenly. What you're about to hear is the brutal truth no MBA program dares teach. The closer you get to sovereign scale influence, the more your freedom becomes conditional. Let's break it down, piece by piece, because inside Jack Ma's fall lies the most advanced strategic lesson every billionaire builder eventually faces. The first friction point, perceived power density. As Alibaba's ecosystem expanded, so did its perceived leverage. Controlling China's largest e-commerce channels. Owning vast consumer behavioral data. Operating a parallel payment system, Alipay, that rivaled the state banking system. Lending billions directly to SMEs, influencing monetary policy velocity. Running cross-border logistics capable of shifting export flows. At some threshold, power accumulation stops being seen as national pride. It starts being seen as potential destabilization leverage. Jack Ma didn't cross a legal line. He crossed a psychological power line, the moment where private influence threatens political monopoly. The second inflection, Ant Group's regulatory collision. Jack Ma's decision to publicly list Ant Group, Alibaba's financial arm, was seen as his final consolidation of financial independence. Ant controlled consumer credit data, micro-lending engines, SME underwriting pipelines, AI-driven credit scoring outside state-owned bank systems. When the IPO was blocked at the last minute, it wasn't because Ant lacked compliance. It was because Ant's scale threatened the central government's control over capital flow, credit distribution, monetary policy transparency. No state tolerates parallel sovereign-scale financial operators for long. The third trigger, public critique breach. Jack's fateful speech criticizing state financial regulators, suggesting they were outdated and stifling innovation, violated the final unwritten rule: do not publicly challenge systemic authority. The words weren't dangerous. The timing and visibility were. Jack had foreign investors listening, global press amplifying his message, rising nationalist undercurrents interpreting his speech as arrogance. That single speech accelerated silent political retaliation processes already quietly forming. In authoritarian systems, the first public critique is often the last tolerated critique. The fourth mechanism, coordinated pressure sequencing. Following the Ant IPO suspension, Jack Ma faced intensified antitrust investigations into Alibaba's e-commerce practices. Forced restructuring of Ant into a financial holding company under tighter state oversight. Common prosperity, wealth redistribution pressures targeting billionaire founders. Alleged requests for Jack to divest certain stakes quietly. The message was clear. Your empire may continue, but your personal power will not. It was not asset seizure. It was personal influence extraction. The fifth stage, public absence optics. Jack disappeared from public view for months. No interviews. No conference appearances. No state-level economic forums. His absence wasn't accidental. It was an engineered narrative reset. Public power was being decoupled from personal visibility. The state was recentering its dominance over China's tech narrative. Jack re-emerged only under highly controlled, state-approved contexts. When a founder disappears, but their company survives, political power has shifted. The sixth pressure, ally repositioning compliance. Key Alibaba executives were rotated. Internal audits were intensified. Political cadres were elevated into strategic governance roles. Regulatory advisory boards gained more state-friendly representation. Jack's loyalists weren't purged entirely. They were repositioned under new power balance mandates. Alibaba remained operationally strong, but politically its independence was systematically diluted. The seventh message to other billionaires: cautionary calibration. Jack Ma's discipline served multiple audiences. A warning to domestic tech elites not to mistake economic success for political immunity. A signal to foreign investors about the real ceiling of private power in China. A consolidation signal reinforcing the party's ultimate control over sovereign economic architecture. Jack Ma became both a fallen example and an allowed survivor. The eighth transformation: personal power contraction. Post-reckoning, Jack Ma relocated substantial personal activity abroad. He stepped back from all Alibaba operational leadership. His global profile dimmed significantly. Educational and philanthropic projects replaced overt business visibility. The empire operated. The founder faded. This is the silent exchange many empire builders eventually face: keep the machine, but surrender the spotlight. The ninth reflection: geopolitical ceiling realization. Jack Ma learned that globalization expands wealth. Sovereign boundaries ultimately gate political power. True autonomy inside hybrid authoritarian systems remains mathematically limited, no matter how brilliant the architecture. His insulation held for years. But sovereignty always outruns private engineering, eventually. He hadn't built immunity. He had built delay. And the final lesson, the forbidden layer of empire building: the larger your system grows, the more it eventually becomes a hostage to the sovereign order you operate inside. Jack Ma wasn't defeated. He was contained. His empire survived because he yielded. As we close Part 9, understand, the most advanced empire builders know, you don't just build to scale. You build to survive your own success. In Part 10, we will conclude this forbidden audiobook, Backhand Index Pointing Right, the Master Framework, the 10 laws every future billionaire must follow, or die. Now we arrive at the final chapter. The chapter no one teaches because most will never reach this level. The chapter only empire architects like Jack Ma, and a few others, truly understand. Because when you scale into sovereign territory, when your creation touches billions, governments, global capital, the game no longer resembles business. It becomes something else entirely: survival architecture. In this final framework, I will give you the 10 laws every future billionaire must master. Laws that Jack Ma lived. Laws that broke many who failed to understand their gravity. Law 1. Build ecosystem power, not product dependency. Products can be copied. Services can be underpriced. Technology can be leapfrogged. But ecosystems, integrated networks of supply chains, sellers, logistics, payments, credit systems, consumer behavior, data, government partnerships, are nearly impossible to replicate. He who owns the ecosystem owns the market's nervous system. Jack Ma built Alibaba not as a platform but as economic infrastructure. Law 2. Engineer asymmetry before scale. Before you expand, before you raise capital, before you acquire users, secure regulatory alignment. Build multi-layered data capture systems. Align mission narratives across all stakeholder groups. Jack didn't wait for scale to begin defensive strategy. He engineered power stacking from the very first moves. Law 3. Translate rejection into non-emotional data. Rejection is not personal. It is market feedback. Jack faced hundreds of rejections early. But every no gave him sharper signal clarity on timing, positioning, messaging, capital strategy. Rejection wasn't failure. It was precision calibration. Law 4. Master multipolar narrative synchronization. Every stakeholder hears a version of your mission. Investors hear ROI vision. Regulators hear national stability vision. Customers hear empowerment vision. Employees hear purpose vision. The message must be aligned, but coded uniquely per audience. Jack's mastery of this law is why he retained such broad stakeholder immunity for years. Law 5. Replace ego with system redundancy. Most founders fail because they want to remain irreplaceable. They over-centralize decision-making. They micromanage what should be delegated. Jack scaled by engineering decision protocols, leadership redundancy, self-optimizing machine intelligence. His absence would not crash the machine. Ego kills scalability. System redundancy ensures survival. Law 6. Institutionalized data supremacy. Data doesn't just inform. It governs lending models, seller rankings, pricing elasticity, logistic pathways, AI-driven fraud prevention. Jack embedded full-spectrum data feedback into every layer of Alibaba's engine. The company learned faster than its competitors could adapt. Law 7. Own the critical path nodes. Jack controlled payments, Alipay, logistics, Cainiao, cloud infrastructure, Alibaba Cloud, merchant education, Taobao University, seller capital, and group. He didn't just own transaction platforms. He owned the critical economic arteries. When you own the arteries, you dictate market oxygen flow. Law 8. Convert expansion into global dependency. Jack engineered Alibaba's global growth not just for revenue, but for multinational capital entanglement. Diplomatic soft power buffering. International government dependency. He made it so multiple global powers benefited financially from Alibaba's rise. When you're financially embedded, you are politically buffered. Law 9. Know your sovereign ceiling. This is where most billionaires fail. They misread how far private power can expand inside any political system. Jack hit his ceiling when Ant Group crossed into sovereign financial domains. Public critique breached tolerance thresholds. Private data density threatened central monetary control. His architecture was brilliant. But no sovereign tolerates parallel governance structures forever. You must know when to yield visibility, to contract personal power, to preserve the machine, not the throne. Law 10. Build to survive your own success. This is the master law. Scaling is not your greatest threat. Success is. The bigger you get, the more enemies emerge. The more regulators awaken. The more sovereign attention sharpens. The more capital dependency morphs into political exposure. Jack's ultimate brilliance wasn't just in what he built. It was in how long he survived at scale before the ceiling lowered. His final yield preserved Alibaba, even as it extracted his personal dominion. The final forbidden truth: you do not own an empire. You temporarily architect its stewardship inside a constantly shifting power ecosystem. You don't aim for dominance. You aim for managed coexistence with sovereign systems. And this is the game Jack Ma mastered. He played at levels most founders will never glimpse. He built as if he would one day lose personal control, and engineered the machine to survive it. That is why Alibaba remained standing even as Jack stepped into strategic silence.